Winston Churchill said about having to, didn't have time to create a short speech, right? Well, I've got 20 minutes to get 26 slides over, so pardon me. But I like to say ex-lead investigator because I'm a practitioner, I've been doing this for many years. And I like to say ex because it's trying to get beyond that, black hole, isn't it? You always get sucked back in some way or other. So really I want to talk about three things today, which is focusing on the culture change at Microsoft, how the pandemic reignited that conversation around digital empathy, and also how that fits into Microsoft's security vision. So actually, I want to just disagree slightly because emotion is our friend if we know what it is that we want to do about it, right? So I think for us, we had somebody called Bill Hill. He used to work at Microsoft, sadly deceased, but he always used to ask developers, what is the most important operating system that you'll ever design for or develop for? And he always used to say, it's not Microsoft, it's not Macintoshes, it's not Windows, it's not Linux, all right? It's the Mark I human person, the Homo sapiens, that evolved about 100,000 years ago. No design changes apparent, and of course it's the thing that actually runs everything, and of course he's right, okay? So we have this mission today, which is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more, and that's a very powerful statement, okay? I like to add in securely, sustainably, and with digital empathy. And I'm not even putting words in Satya Nadella's mouth because he's gone on record as saying innovation and empathy is core to the innovation agenda. And I think that's key. So this top-down focus on on empathy has really changed the culture. And that's no easy thing to do because back to the OT, IoT thing, it's about people, you've got to change the culture. So we now have this aspire to mindset. That is, we aspire to get to where we're going, but we may never get there. So we want to realize that the journey, we're going to work hard to try and get there, by the way, but we want to realize that the journey and how we get there is as important as achieving that goal. And Microsoft today is no longer that monolithic organization that you may have been known and loved in the past. Okay, there's that loved word, that's emotion. So yeah, we want to be thinking about how we can empower people and what that means from a customer obsession perspective. So if we've got empathy as a core tenet, then we really want to be thinking about how we make other people to be successful, right? Make them successful and help them to do that. And if we define empathy as the ability to sense other people's emotions and potentially couple that with an ability to imagine what they're going through, then we always think about, for us anyway, inside Microsoft, that gaming is very key to that kind of emotion gendering capability. We like to say that we don't have users inside Xbox, we have fans. More than a third of the world plays games. In fact, we're making gamers quicker than we're making humans. And what we really want to do is think about how emotion is critical from those outcomes, how we want people to genuinely love what it is that they're doing and playing, and actually we'd really like to get that sort of empathy and emotion into every interaction with Microsoft services and products. You know, there's a journey there, I think, but that's still something that we aspire to do. So if we look at empathy and action, back to Dr. Adrian, and this is an MRI machine. This was developed by Doug Dietz at General Electric, all right? Hopefully none of us ever have to go into it, but essentially he was very proud of his technical achievement, and it's a marvelous piece of kit, right? But what he found was, as he saw his first patient go through it, which was a little girl, she got terribly traumatized by it, and she had to be sedated before she could actually go into the MRI scan. So he thought long and hard about this, did a bit of an investigation, found out that something like 80% of kids who were going through this needed to be sedated. So he went back to his design team, and he came up with this. All right? Now, again, Dr. Adrian, if I ever have to go into an MRI scan, can it look like this, please? Because this is the submarine adventure that he created to allow patients to not be as traumatized. So he actually found that less than 20% of children had to be sedated after, less than 20% of children had to be sedated to go into that. And actually, quite a few of them afterwards came back and said, can I go back into that venture, please? Because it was a lot of fun, right? So I think we'd all prefer that. Why is this a common sight for us as humans, right? This is essentially desire lines. We see this happen all the time. People take the shortest route to whatever they're trying to get to, and so they go off the path that was designed by them, by somebody else, okay? Desire lines are also called free will ways, and it came from a guy called Andrew Furman, who's a professor of architecture at New York University. In fact, I think it's Toronto, actually, sorry. But he said, essentially, this tells him that humans want the ability to make their own choices, right? They don't want to be dictated to. After all, we all leave home because we don't want our parents continuously telling us what it is that they want us to do, right? And we can look at inside a risk through the lens of these desire lines, free will ways. Over half of insider threats are caused by people just wanting to do their job. If those people are in services such as hospitals, where they're giving life-threatening and life safety concerns, obviously very concerning to everybody, then they don't care about regulatory compliance. They just want the technology to get out of the way so they can do their jobs. So I think that we know and we've seen that if you put too many controls around something, people will bypass it and they will go off and try and use other things. So shadow IT obviously is something that we see come from that. So we pivoted to thinking about how security could become usable, right? Security that's built in, it's simple to use, and integrates into the way that people work and behave. If anybody here has met Brett Arsenal, who's Microsoft CISO, he is a force of nature, right? He basically says that security needs to behave like the airbags of the industry. Essentially, they should always be protecting you, but they should never get in the way. When, however, we think about building empathy and building security into the productivity experience, we often just mean that from a technology perspective, and we want to move away from that. Because instead of technologists telling people how to do things, we want to, as technologists, think about how people actually use the equipment and do it in, create the technology that then allows them to do what they need to do. So this cycle of blame the end user because they've made the wrong choice, and then we apply more draconian measures, and then we blame them because they do something else. There's that lovely advert. Do you remember we've got all the cybersecurity tooling over here, and over here we've got Dave, okay? So we want to get away from thinking about it's a problem with people itself. So if we can think about building solutions which are people-centric and involving them to reflect the interaction, actually we probably would get more security and we get more productivity, and that's a good thing, a balance between both, right? So our end goals are happy users, right? Take away everything else, happy users. What makes a happy user? No, what makes me happy, right? If I can use tech that doesn't get in the way, if it doesn't crash when I'm midway through something, if I don't lose my data. Do you remember the bad old days when you actually had to remember to back up your data, but now it does it magically because it's in the cloud? And then when your hard drive crashes, you don't lose your data anymore. In fact, I never store data on my hard disk, back to the comment about where is that data, right? It's in the cloud and it's protected from the cloud. So it's great, in fact, so that's joy. And in fact, there's something interesting that's happening in the industry around chief joy officers. Anybody heard of those? It's a thing now, right, where people are actually being hired to bring joy to their employees and to the customers that they work with. So we believe that secure tech really needs to support that vision. So no story about people can fail to talk about adversaries. Obviously, COVID-19 pandemic, this has been talked about a lot through the course of this session already. But we saw a massive increase in cyber attacks, up 400%. We saw that there was a trend towards human-powered activities by the criminals. We saw with the Microsoft Security Signals report, which is out, something like 70% of those attacks that ended in ransomware started with brute force attacks against the RDP protocol. Okay? With the Digital Defense report we've got that came out, about 6 months ago, we see that the attacks have rapidly increased in volume. velocity, and sophistication, and that attackers are moving towards, again, ransomware, but also thinking about how they are stealing credentials. And this has led to us to think about, what the new kind of security principles there is that we need to be thinking about it. One of the previous speakers spoke about, of course, the fragility of the supply chain, not picture, solar winds is fine, and the fact that what it's going to cost us in terms of $6 trillion was the estimate back in 2021, going forward to 2025, something like 10.5 trillion, okay? So essentially then, we took a step away from it. Those are all the problems. What is it, and what is the impact on our people? What can we do about our people and stopping this burnout? Because essentially, that's what it is. If you look at any of the different roles that we have here through the lens of that, you can see that the vast majority of that is stress. And in fact, there should be a great big red sign over the top of that that says stress. Proofpoint released a report in 2021 called Voice of the CISO. Something like 32% of CISOs said that they feared that they would lose their job if they had a cyber attack, right? Then it went on to say something like 64% of the CISOs feared an imminent cyber attack in the next year. So you can imagine that half of those people figured they would lose their jobs, which is not a good thing. Then through the lenses of the others, we can see that it's too much data, too few people, overwhelming noise, can't stitch the signal together, and this becomes something that contributes to the high pressure, the burnout, and the stress. So again, inside our Cyber Defense Operations Center, which is we call our next-gen SOC, if you will, that was, all of this stuff was, obvious, and we were having the same problem. So we wanted to look about how we could fix them. So the strategy, obviously thinking again about what Zero Trust potentially could do with us, how we would stitch together these signals so that we would only have to look through one space to find that information from a security analyst perspective. In 2021 alone, we blocked more than 9 billion pieces of malware, okay? We got to something like 36 billion phishing emails, and altogether, we stopped over 71 billion cybersecurity attacks against the industry. So I think that kind of speaks for itself, right? But we'll move back to what the people think about that in a little bit, because we didn't do this with technology alone, all right? Obviously, capability is the trifecta of people, process, and technology. I would add, actually, or argue that the fourth one ought to be information, because information is the context that the data that we give to data to allow us to make that decision-making process, okay? So if we say people, process, technology, and information, all right? So with that capability, we then came up with some modern security principles, and that was, number one, identity is the new control plane. Attackers log on. They don't break in the vast majority of cases, all right? Protect, at the moment, your privileged identities. That's critical to thinking about how you protect yourself right now, okay? We know from the signals that we get that something like, enabling MFA, passwordless authentication would give you something like a 99% risk reduction, which I think is a good thing. However, we can also see that as of December 2021, only 22% of people had actually implemented strong authentication protection, all right? So that's key to what we're giving there. So essentially with the cloud, we want to be able to aggregate that data into the platform of signals to give us cohesion, coherence, and consistency while staying compliant, right? Everybody has to focus on the GDPR stuff. Now this allows us to defend by bringing together consistent evidence to be able to allow us to do something about that quickly, and then obviously to respond without effort, because we've got machine learning. So if the answer is anything, it's machine learning to augment the capability and the intelligence of humans, right? So our security vision is we want to protect everything, we want to simplify the complex, catch what others miss, and rapidly respond. So I mentioned the CDOC, our Cyber Defense Operations Center. Our motto there is minutes matter, all right? We get 24 trillion signals on a daily basis. You can imagine that there is no human that's actually looking at that. So we have a 91% true positive rate. It's not 91%, no human ever looks at it, okay? That took a bit of culture change as well, actually, while I'm thinking about it, because, of course, defenders want all the data, don't they, so they can find the signal. Once we'd managed to get over it, that was something, as they say, the rest is history, right? So it's zero trust. I know that's been spoken about already. This, just to comment, because we did an awful lot of blogging from a Microsoft perspective, we never came out and specifically said, you know, this zero trust model is what saved us from the same sort of impact that others saw from Nobelium attacks. All right, so certainly something to take away from this. We then want to detect across that platform of signals. We mentioned that already. We built state-of-the-art scalable machine learning algorithms. So the answer is machine learning. Let's think about adversarial machine learning on another session. And then we want to be able to very quickly stitch all of those signals together and then be able to use automation, orchestration to be able to do something about it. Get rid of the vast majority of signals that don't mean anything to anyone to allow our defenders to actually focus on what's important. So we kind of put all of this stuff together in thinking about kind of how we would bring together those different aspects. Underneath, we talk about the intelligent security graph, which is that huge planetary scale data that we have available to us. We have ML, so fusion technology that sits over the top of it, that stitches all those different cross-service analytics pieces and puts them together into one incident. So again, defenders can be looking in one place at one incident. That correlation's already done for you. Left-hand side, we've got Defender, M365 Defender, which is basically securing your end-user environment. Defender for Cloud secures your infrastructure. Together they form XDR, which is a fairly new term out of the industry, which is extended cross-detection and response. And then we put the Microsoft Sentinel, which essentially is a SIEM, a source service that was born in the cloud, as a bird's eye view into what's happening from the organization. But again, we want it to be multi-cloud, whether you're on-prem, in the cloud, you know, hybrid, whatever you are, be able to get that data and do something useful with it. So how does that help us with our roles? Well, I like to think that this results in improved security. We've got better efficiency, operational excellence, perhaps never a carefree CISO, but hopefully somebody who can have a little bit more sleep, right? Managers get to keep and hire staff, again, something that we know has been problematic in the industry. For us, using ML as that first layer to the SOC has allowed us to hire people from university and in weeks train them up to be effective members of the SOC, because we aren't looking for security people. We can train them. What we're looking for is data scientists and people who understand and how to work with machine learning. We talk about very quickly with DevSecOps, I prefer to call it SecDevOps, right? They are not security people either. Let's give them the capability to do secure development out of the box. This is built into CodeQL, for example. You could use that if you're checking code into GitHub. Plenty of different things that you could do, for example, standing up secure infrastructure using Azure Blueprints for dev. All of this sort of thing is built into the case. So final two metrics that we have from the SOC perspective in the CDOC, we only have two we consider important, is MTTA and MTTR. One is the mean time to acknowledge, so how quickly do we work to find out that somebody's in there. The other one is the mean time to respond. Obviously, our motto is minutes matter, so come and talk to us if you want to know exactly what our mean time to respond is. But essentially, we now get to remediate and to investigate 100% of our incidents, as opposed to normally what we see in the industry is between 27 and 30%. All right? So our vision is we want to employ, yeah, come join Microsoft. We want to empower customers with world-class platforms, and we want them to be best in class or best in suite, depending on your infrastructure. We don't want to, the real world is you're not going to have all of Microsoft stuff, right? In today's technology world, we like to say that the pace of change is extraordinary. The innovator's dilemma is that for every 10 or so years, the technology advances, and that's speeding up. So how organizations can truly achieve transformation is at the intersection of people, process, technology, information, and culture, okay? because ultimately this is a people story and we owe it to our people to get this right. Thank you for listening.